Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Rewritten! Fanny's chip was out now. In a matter of moments, Moon's entire world had been shattered. And he was so messed up by the jarring change, he could barely pay attention to the scene around him, much less react to it properly. He hardly remembered anything from the Showtime run or parts and services, except for the sudden spike of energy whenever he saw Gregory in danger, the horrors of the scrap pit, and getting mad at Roxy for insulting Sun. Moon had been drifting away the whole time, his ears filled with static and his eyes too fogged to see out of, like condensation on a window. And now he felt like he had knots being tightened over his insides, each step that he took in the pacing circle making it worse and worse. Would the others be able to find James in time? Would they find Vanny in time? What was she doing? Why was this happening? What could Vanny possibly want out of this? Did he raise her wrong? No, a tiny piece of him tried to say, no, Fanny would never do anything to hurt James. She's a good kid. This has to be some sort of mistake. It was Afton. Of course. Afton had to have something to do with this, right? He was back. He was back. He knew that he was back. Somehow. Right? Yes, of course. That was it. Afton was doing it. Somehow. Fanny would never do this. What if the others hurt Vanny? Moon should be out there with them. Why did they leave him behind? Did they hate him? Were they scared that he would snap? Did they think he was crazy? He was not crazy. What if something happened? How would he know if they needed help? James was out there somewhere, alone and scared. He had to go after him. He could be dying right now. He could already see it, the deathly pale skin, the glassy eyes, the blue lips. He could already hear the mother. He'd have to explain to a panicky mother that he wasn't fast enough, that he didn't keep her baby safe, that he was so sorry. Son would never forgive him. What had he done wrong? Why did Vanny grow up like this? This was all his fault. Moon should have raised her better. Her father was so busy with the company, he didn't pay much attention to her. Moon was more of a parent to her than Victor was. So, of course it was Moon's fault. All his fault. All his fault. No! Wait, no. It wasn't Vanny. It couldn't be her. He refused to see it that way. It was Afton. It had to be Afton, right? Right? What if his manager blamed Sun and tortured him again? Moon couldn't bear to listen to his screams while being on the inside, unable to do anything but watch. What if they didn't get to James fast enough? What if they just found a corpse? He could already imagine the horrible smell, the dried blood, the mother's face as she realized her baby was gone. And Gregory, it would be the same for him. Gregory was counting on them. He was keeping himself together solely because Freddy promised to bring his brother back, but if James had already succumbed to whatever happened to him... No, they had to find him before that. Please, let them find him before that. Moon wanted to help more than anything, but Freddy was right about Gregory. Moon couldn't leave him unattended. They couldn't have two missing kids on their hands. Moon had decided to bring Gregory to a more discreet hiding place, and he had chosen the theater. There was an offline staff bot on stage, waiting to be given some comedy reel, but they had ignored it and hid backstage among the cords and props stacked up neatly against each other. They hadn't spoken a word since settling down here. Gregory kept his eyes firmly on him, his knuckles white against his legs. He had his chin resting on his knees, unblinking as he watched Moon pace, the fear practically leaking from him. Even the lightness of not having the collar anymore wasn't helping. Was this a safe enough place? What if Fanny could see them through the security cameras? Moon had destroyed the camera in the corner, but it had seen them for at least 30 seconds before he noticed it. A black rectangle of shadow cast beneath the edge of the closed curtains, marking where the staff bot was standing. But What if Vanny could see through the staff pod? He expected it to rumble to life at any moment, for the blocky three-fingered hands to reach in through the velvet curtain. Could it overpower him? Even though he was trying to seem unfazed, Moon was still injured. Gregory had tried his best, but he hadn't repaired him as well as a qualified technician could. The fall had cracked quite a few things on the inside, and even though Moon didn't understand what exactly was broken, the pain that was crawling up his body was enough to tell him that things weren't entirely back to normal. A hot, throbbing pressure was squeezing his lower back, something between his shoulders rattling sharply every time he moved too fast, each intake of breath met with a tight soreness. The dull thudding in his spine was making it difficult to stand up straight, the part that Gregory replaced tingling like it was stuck full of needles. And, of course, his bad arm was complaining the most about all this. Ever since the kid started pulling his left arm off for fun, the socket had grown more and more damaged to the point that the technicians gave up on repairing it. They'd just stick it back on and send him off, instead of replacing the entire endoskeleton structure of his shoulders. And literally falling through the ceiling didn't do his bad arm any favors. Every time he tried to use the bad arm, it was met with an even more intense ache in the arm's joints, making it impossible to hold onto anything heavy for very long. He was pretty sure it was about to fall off on its own, despite his efforts to be careful with it. All of it was really slowing him down, which made him even more wound up with fear, unsure if he would even be able to fend off any threats if they came for Gregory. What if she was coming right now? He could see it. He could see how easily she would sneak in, how easy it would be to knock him aside. He had to stay focused. He had to stay alert. What was that sound? Nothing, maybe. Stay strong. Don't falter. Moon's little hooks scraped against each other, his jaws so tight it was beginning to hurt. His mind was too full right now. He wanted to do something about the tension, but the air felt so thick he might as well be trying to walk underwater. It was embarrassing, really, how much Moon had messed up here. It would have been bad enough already if he had been chipped to attack a child mindlessly, but that wasn't the extent of the chip's effects. Moon hadn't been simply mind-controlled. He had really, truly believed that Gregory was dangerous and needed to be turned into Vanessa before he hurts his kids. It wasn't the first time the chip made him think that. He uncomfortably tried to dart away from that memory. Moon was just glad that at least the chip hadn't been permanently etched into his coding. The programming capsule that he had pried Vanessa's chip out of wasn't where the animatronic's main program was stored. They said the permanent files were kept in their heads, on a motherboard that was apparently so complicated Moon couldn't even fathom how AI like himself existed. The capsule in his throat was only used for programs that they were testing out, waiting to see the true influence it had on the animatronics before converting it to a permanent file. That purple chip had been in the testing slot for a long, long time, but at least Vanessa hadn't buried it any deeper into his program. Then it would have been irreversible. Even now, with the chip being held by Freddy to give to the authorities later, the scars the chip's foreign program had left in him were deeper than ever. He couldn't tell which thoughts were his and which thoughts were echoes of the chip, like a well-worn path carved too deeply in him to stray far from. Moon was making some sort of mistake here. It felt wrong, setting off all sorts of alarms. Wait a second, the kid that he was hiding was bad, right? Moon went over the events of the night again, each memory ragged and full of holes. He was missing something. He had to snap out of it. Something was wrong. Gregory wasn't in the visitor's database. He wasn't supposed to be here. Right? What was Gregory up to? What if he was just faking innocence? What if... No, that was the chip talking. Moon tried to stop, hooks grating around his circular face. He had to get a hold of himself. But it was so hard. He had been living in this horrible paranoid world for so long. He didn't know how to think without it. When had he been chipped? How many of the thoughts in his head were his? How long has it been since he's been normal? What even was considered normal? If he couldn't find anything beneath those anxiety-ridden thoughts, who was he in the first place? Who was he? The childish urge to cry overcame him. Of course, as an animatronic, he physically couldn't produce tears. Instead, his eyes began to flicker. He could feel them, going dark 1 second and then bright, dark then bright, at least 8 times as he tried to regain his composure. He had seen the same odd phenomenon on the other animatronics before. Instead of crying, their eyes would flicker on and off rapidly, something that disguised their distress from the customers. He hoped for a few seconds that Gregory wouldn't notice how upset he was getting. But the shaky gasping began to creep up on him, the tightening in his throat and the contractions of his facial features messing everything up. Moon turned away from Gregory stiffly, trying to calm himself. This wasn't even the most important thing he should be worrying about. There were plenty of other more important matters to handle. This one was just making all of it so much worse, like a piece of gum getting stuck between his gears. What if he messed up? What if he got Sun scrapped? What if he lost Gregory? He couldn't fail again, he wouldn't. Please, just let me do one thing right. What was that noise? He listened. Nothing. Just stay alert, be ready. Moon? What's happening? Where's Gregory? Sun's voice echoed around his head, rising to half-consciousness yet again. Sun's mind felt like an unstable, spazzing ball of fire that kept on flaring up and then dimming low over and over again. His usual bright buttercup yellow thoughts were now stained a deep, bloody crimson and black, terrified icy streaks of white sparking off of him every time he rose closer to wakefulness. There was still dim lighting here, a very low amount, off-white and filtering down between the curtains, coming from a spotlight that had been rounded on the stage. Normally, this would mean that him and his brother's control over their mutual body was up to who had the most willpower. But Sun's complete and total exhaustion was keeping his fight for control feeble and ineffective, something that only frightened the little unstable star even more. Go back to sleep, Sonny, Moon told him, holding the sides of his head to keep the sunbeams inside. Everything's okay, just go to sleep. When he closed his eyes, the light receptors in his pupils shifted the power back to Moon, sensing that they were now in complete darkness. But even though Sun couldn't come out, that didn't mean that he went back to sleep. He tried to carefully push Sun down, but it was like trying to hold a soap bubble. His mind popped out in an explosion the moment that he touched him, the pleas even more desperate. Please, don't hurt him, Sun begged. Please, he's just a baby! I'm not hurting him, Moon insisted for the 1000th time. Who do you take me for? Sun had asked that same question hundreds of different times, but he either didn't believe him or was too out of it to remember anything more than a few seconds. It was honestly kind of offensive that Sun even felt the need to remind Moon not to hurt a child. Please, don't hurt him, Sun pleaded feebly. Let me back out! You already had your turn, Moon snapped back, frustration rustling from deep inside of him. You had your turn for an entire month. Just let me deal with this. I'm not going to do anything to Gregory, okay? Moon pushed down on him, trying his best to be gentle as Sun sank back below the horizon. No, please. Sun's words faded to nothing as he was submerged into sleep, dormant again. Moon had to keep Sun down. His brother couldn't take full control while the lights were off, but if Sun stayed awake in his head, he could still see what was happening. It was natural for Moon to worry about people not getting enough sleep. It was his job, of course. He was a naptime guardian. But he didn't need that program to know that the best thing that Sun could do right now is calm down and rest. Until Gregory came a few hours ago, Sun had been awake for a grand total of 29 days. He was just going to keep on acting hysterical and force Moon to stay on the inside if that continued. If he just gave Moon another chance. Several painful images flickered in the back of his head. The way she screamed, his hooks cutting into her, the guard hitting him with a baton so hard he let go. He knew Sun hadn't forgiven him for what happened to Sophie. But that was before. That was when Moon had the chip. It was an accident. He just thought she was a capture bot. And then... I'm not like that. That wasn't me. I'm not like that, I swear. He wanted to talk to Sun about it, but it felt too uncomfortable to even mention it. Don't think about it. Tell him later, after all this is over. Prove him wrong. Moon glanced back to Gregory after he regained control. He was still staring at him with red-rimmed eyes, his little body shivering with fatigue. And he looked quite nervous, probably because, to him, Moon had just been arguing with himself. His bandages were stained pink with the bits of blood from the scrapes, his hair oily and unkempt, clothes smudged with grime. He looked too thin for Moon's comfort. Were his parents not feeding him well enough? He wished that he could go and get him food without leaving him vulnerable back here. How long had it been since Gregory had been given a bath? He needed new clothes, too. The ones that he was wearing were covered with mud and ragged holes. Moon was programmed to notice things like that, signs that a kid needed help. He made a mental note to tell somebody once this was all over. But, worst of all, Gregory's hurt leg was stretched out, the cut-up toes twitching every now and then. A heavy weight sank inside of him, making him shift uncomfortably. Come on, say something. The little boy visibly jumped at the sound of his voice, head snapping back down towards the wooden floorboards beneath his tattered sneakers. He wasn't making eye contact, another worrying sign. But then again, it could just be because... Moon cut himself off, looking away in discomfort. He hated this. He hated it so much. He sighed, shaking himself out, his nightcap curling around him tightly. Look, Gregory... While we're both here, I want you to know that I'm sorry for attacking you. That caught his attention. Gregory tilted his chin back up, blinking at him with watery eyes. I'm ashamed that I put a child's life in danger, Moon mumbled, his nightcap curling up over his shoulders to try and comfort himself. Nothing that I did was acceptable. I completely failed at doing the one thing I'm built for. So I understand if you're mad at me. Gregory nodded weakly, his expression flickering unsteadily. It was obvious that Gregory was still holding back his actual feelings on the situation. But of course he was. Gregory was currently hunkering behind a curtain with a crazy animatronic that could supposedly change his mind and betray him at any moment. Unsatisfied, Moon tried to explain with, I know I've never met Afton once, but every day I'm scared that he'll come back, and I'll be the only one who can stop him before he... He closed his mouth. They fell into silence again. He wanted to say more, but he was thinking that maybe Gregory just wanted him to shut up. An odd noise broke him out of his thoughts. He glanced at Gregory, then stopped in his tracks. The little boy was crying again. It wasn't heavy and despairing quite yet, his face scrunching up even more every time he rubbed his eyes, but it looked like it might get ugly pretty soon. You all right? Moon asked, guilt searing up his back. Gregory's watery eyes lifted to him, full of exhaustion and terror. Do you think Freddy and the others will be okay? He squeaked. Moon considered that, eventually deciding on, yes, of course. An empty space was left in the air. Fanny wouldn't hurt them, Moon elaborated. We'll just have to find her and figure out what she's been doing. There's a reasonable explanation for all of this somewhere, I'm sure. Vanessa took James, Gregory stated, staring blankly at the floor. Something twitched inside of him, a pause in the cranking gears. He's probably safe somewhere, Moon said, hooked wires tangling up tight against one another. She might just be taking care of him. He probably looked all ragged, so Fanny took him back home to clean him up, or something. Gregory gave him a look. So, Vanessa makes an elaborate costume that makes her invisible to robots, chips everyone into insanity, almost gets away with kidnapping me, but she's innocent and just having a sleepover with James, Gregory said blandly, his eyebrows raised so far they nearly touched his hairline. But I exist in the daycare, and you immediately think, security alert, 10-year-old boy at large! Moon clenched his teeth together, the discomfort squeezing tighter in him. Well, when you say it like that, I'm just saying it how it is, Gregory interrupted. Awkward silence lodged between them. So are you gonna give me to her? Gregory challenged. No, Moon said quickly. No, not after all this. I'm just saying that maybe... Gregory waited for a while, but Moon was never able to find the right way to end that sentence. Vanny isn't a bad kid, Moon insisted. Once we find her, it'll all make sense. Gregory retained eye contact this time, something clicking. Not a bad kid? He questioned. Moon froze, looking away. Well, she's like 30, Gregory said. 29, Moon corrected. Oh yeah, 29 still qualifies as a kid, Gregory said dryly. Moon didn't respond, kind of hoping that he would just drop it. But then Gregory prodded suspiciously. How long have you known her? Moon sighed, his nightcap curling around his middle in discomfort. Look, because of who their dad is, Fanny and her brother have practically lived in the Pizzaplex since they were little kids. And we knew them even before then, back whenever we were still getting programmed for our jobs. She used to be so... His eyes stung, throat shriveling up. He was more glad than ever that he physically couldn't cry. He shook his head, shoving those thoughts away. Point is, I've known Vanny since she was this tall. He held his cap's bell at about his knee, not much bigger than Gregory. This place is a part of her. She's so passionate about her work here. She's been really stressed after her dad passed away, but Fanny isn't a bad kid. She's not. Gregory's eyes blinked back up at him in the darkness, hugging his knees closer to his chest. Well, I hope you're right, he mumbled. Something tugged at Moon. He instinctively stepped towards him, wanting to comfort him, but leaned away awkwardly instead. Gregory didn't give a sign of noticing. Moon looked down at his catchers, the ends of the hooks tangling together. He tried to relax and get them to go away. But what if he needed them again soon? What if the staff bot attacked? Anxiety continued to scuttle up his back, distracting him. But Gregory was upset. He had to comfort. He had to put the hooks away for just a few minutes. He finally managed to calm down enough that they reeled back into his arm, the two halves of his hands clacking back together again. Satisfied, Moon leaned over to sit down beside Gregory. The movement made a sharp warning slice up his back, and he stopped halfway down, becoming stiff. Ow, okay. Ow, something was definitely still broken. Moon eventually flopped down heavily beside Gregory, gasping from the pain. He forced himself to settle and keep quiet, and hugged an arm around him. Gregory tensed up at first, but eventually accepted it and leaned against him. It seemed that even comfort from Moon was welcome, given how worried he must be about his brother. Moon knew that if someone had taken Sonny away, he would accept comfort even from a random hobo. Moon didn't speak, knowing that sometimes it was best if he just kept quiet. Gregory leaned against him, sighing. They stayed like that for a while. The whole time, he secretly worried about how vulnerable he was right now. He didn't want to sit down, much less not have his hooks at the ready. But a separate piece of his program pushed back on that. When comforting a kid, do not leave abruptly. Stay still, be there for them, try not to look freaked out. They will freak out if you freak out. Eventually, Gregory piped up with, "What do you think is gonna..." Before Gregory could finish, a frightening combination of sounds seeped in through the curtains, making Moon bolt upright like he had been struck by lightning. Neither of them had to say anything. They were both stiff and frozen, listening intently. The sounds bounced around the distant walls of the mall, full of cranking and hissing pistons and heavy, stomping feet. It was DJ, no doubt about it. Moon's breathing stalled, a chill rushing through his body, mind racing. He wasn't supposed to be over here. Even though DJ was a friend, Moon got up and quietly moved in front of Gregory, blocking him from who was lurking out there. It hurt quite a lot to do that movement so fast, but he hardly cared. And, of course, Moon's mind immediately snapped to, DJ is chipped again. His hands split in half and the black wires slithered back out, tipped with razor-sharp crescents. Anxiety began to spiral out into all sorts of horrible images. Ones where he struggled to fight off the massive machine on his own, ones where Gregory was crushed and dragged away. It was easy to knock an animatronic out. A strong enough strike to their head would cause a system shutdown, something that DJ had immediately taken advantage of inside the tunnels. It had taken about 5 seconds for DJ to swat Moon into the wall and keep going after Gregory. And that was when Moon was fully functional. Now, even though he was standing still, pain was still making him rigid and shaky. He was injured and alone. How could he ever... Moon grabbed onto Gregory, curled his hooks outward so they wouldn't cut him, and bolted. Immediately, his wounded spine screamed at him to slow down, but Moon was too frightened to listen. There wasn't really anywhere to hide backstage, so he just went along the piles of boxes and wires, trying to find a safe place to go. Eventually, he found an offshoot hallway, the space so narrow he had to turn himself sideways to get through. At the end was a small bathroom, hidden away from the faint light. It wasn't one with multiple stalls, only having one singular sink and toilet, so he decided that it was the best that he could do and stashed Gregory inside. Moon staggered, holding onto the wall for support, his entire body rioting in protest from the sudden movements that he had just performed. His bad arm shifted and rattled in its socket, making it feel like a leech was latched onto his armpit. He held onto the bad arm to try and lighten the pressure, while it furiously punished him for carrying so much extra weight. He took shallow breaths, trying to wait for it to pass, his legs feeling as frail as toothpicks. Come on, he had to keep on going. A child was in danger, he had to push through this. Gregory didn't ask questions, didn't wonder what he was doing. They both already knew what was going on. Moon shut the door behind him and waited until Gregory locked it with a click. Moon crept his way back to the stage, even though he didn't have to be quiet to avoid grabbing DJ's attention. He just had to confirm his suspicions before going into complete panic mode. If Vanny was coming for them, he needed to find a much better place to hide. Moon reached out to the curtains. The dark red velvet glowed a bit with the light of his eyes, soft and sleek. He slowly swept it back, peeking out, the empty rows of audience chairs staring back at him in the dark. Outside, past the double exit doors, was where DJ's form was undoubtedly lurking. Several loud musical notes played out, like he was calling for him. Moon listened for a while, picking through every single detail. DJ hadn't made this much noise whenever they were first running away from him. The only noises he had made were in reaction to a sudden event. Did this mean that this continuous composed tune was good? Another worry tugged him in the opposite direction. If DJ was trying to get a hold of him, something could be wrong. He had to know. Moon let the curtains sweep closed behind him, heading down off the stage, moving around the rows of cushioned burgundy seats up to the exit door. Standing there, listening to DJ's multiple pattering feet and cranking gears, he took several deep breaths and finally pushed to look outside. He readied himself to leap back, to just spring away at the slightest hint of danger. But as his eyes adjusted to the lobby area's faint starlight, DJ's shadow cast into view, a part of his head lowering towards him. Moon leaned back, trying to angle himself to get a good look at his face, while the massive machine came to a stop with a relieved smile. DJ wasn't moving robotically and mindlessly like he did before, his colorful expression lighting up whenever he saw him. His eyes weren't dilated, which was the most telling detail. Dilated eyes was the one thing consistent between him and the others whenever they were still chipped. Moon's eyes had probably looked the same, but right now, DJ's weren't. So, keeping a fair distance away, Moon watched as DJ began to sign to him, helping him slowly grow more and more certain that he was probably safe. "Oh, thank goodness I found you," DJ signed in ASL. "I was getting really worried that we would run out of time." To speak to DJ, Moon had to retract his wires. He obviously couldn't use ASL if his hands were made of sharp hooks. He hesitated a bit longer, not wanting to put away his weapons. He positioned himself so he could retreat at the slightest advance, and let the wires slither back into his arm, repressing the restless itch. Once his fingers were back in order, Moon began to sign to DJ for the rest of the conversation. "What are you doing out here?" Moon asked. "You were supposed to guard the entrance. Is something going wrong?" "Yeah, something is definitely going wrong," DJ signed, chuckling nervously, one pair of his hands wringing together as he glanced around the mall and then back to him. "I have good news and bad news. Good news, I found Vanessa. Bad news, she found everyone else." Moon's knees felt weak. "What do you mean?" DJ sighed deeply, rubbing out a part of his face, beginning to rapidly explain. "Okay, so basically, I was guarding the entrance like I was supposed to, but after a while I thought, okay, yeah, this sucks because I haven't done anything even remotely useful tonight, so I decided that I should probably try and do a smart thing instead." He was getting faster, his gloved hands shaking even though he was trying to smile casually as if all of this was just a silly work story that he was exchanging with him. "So I decided to call the police because for some reason we haven't done that yet. But none of us have a phone in our head or anything, so I went up into my tunnels again and got to one of the help booths, but my fingers were too big, so I got a broom handle, but even after I called 911, I realized that I couldn't hear them and they couldn't understand me. They definitely thought that it was just a prank call with somebody body slamming a piano for a weird joke or something. So I gave up on that idea and went back to the entrance and thought, hey, maybe I can get the attention of people outside, because if I just start screaming, there's no way anyone will be able to sleep, so maybe then they would call the police. So I reached in through the arcade and definitely did not break any games, but the doors were locked again." Moon stepped back, struggling to digest the information overload. DJ just kept on going. "That was really confusing, because Gregory was supposed to be done with the warm-up protocol, and then I realized, oh yeah, Vanessa can just lock it remotely from her office, and oh my goodness, things got worse." DJ paced around in a circle, nervously laughing a bit, but still not seeming to really find this funny. "I wanted to find the others and bring them back together, because frankly, it's a terrible idea to split up. But I was looking and I couldn't find them, so I just went to Vanessa's office and spotted her dragging Freddy into the back. He was unconscious, and it was pretty clear what had happened. And of course she saw me, because I'm a huge noisy robot thanks to whatever idiot designed me. So she gave me a demand to pass on to you." Alarm prickled up his back, coming with a sinking weight of doom. Oh, please, no, she couldn't. DJ relayed the message to him. "Your search party fell apart. If you want to get your friends back, go to the security office. The door to the secret office should be unlocked." Each word sent a dark wave crashing over him, leaving him weak by the end of it. I'm sorry. I tried to grab Freddy. I really did. DJ apologized in a flurry. But I can't fit inside the security office, and I have no idea where she took them, and at first I was just bored out of my mind, but now I'm scared out of my mind, and I don't know what to do, and... He smacked his hands into his face, still trying to laugh, even though he was visibly shivering from fright. It is definitely 100% a trap, but I can't think of what else to do because we probably only have about 5 minutes left, and... It was such a small message, but it was enough. Moon just stared into empty space, too shocked to react. Are you okay? DJ signed to him, dragging him out of his shriveled thoughts. Moon stepped back and closed the door. For a long while, he could just stand there, hand on the knob, a coldness freezing him down to his core. He drifted back through the curtains, down through the narrow hall, and knocked on the bathroom door. Moon? Gregory whispered, once he opened up, his eyes ringed white. What happened? Did DJ attack you? Moon relayed what had happened as they moved back across the theater and opened the door again to see DJ looking very confused for Moon's absence. DJ gave us a message. Vanny ambushed the others. She caught them, all of them. She wants us to meet her in her office. Somehow, repeating what DJ had said made it feel more real, shaking off the stony silence and plunging him into something worse. Dread erupted from deep inside of him, surging up Moon's body. This has to be a mistake, Moon stammered, things crumbling down around him all over again. Maybe one of them attacked her and she got scared and... Hey, where are you? Gregory was on his feet already, pulling sharply out of Moon's grasp, moving out towards DJ. I'm going to save Freddy, he said. Are you going to help or just keep on making excuses? The harshness of the statement made him flinch back. But seeing Gregory about to charge off on his own made his protective programming lock firmly at the front of his mind. Yeah, of course. Moon sprang lopsidedly to his feet, trying his best to ignore the crackling pain in his spine. We have to figure out what Vanny's doing. Gregory turned away, fists balling up at his sides. As the kid began to march off, map in hand, Moon grabbed him by the shoulder, stopping him. Wait, hold on, he said, lifting his hooks away from the little boy. I should go, but not you. You can still hide until all this blows over. Gregory didn't hesitate at all this time. No way. Only I can see Vanessa. I'm not leaving Freddy and James. All right then, Moon said, setting off with DJ leading the way and Gregory keeping tightly to his side. Stay close. Despite the voice of little Vanny drifting through his mind, Moon reactivated his wires. The tiny silvery hooks snapped tight at the ready. Incident report. This is all over the news, but boss said that it was necessary to run an official play-by-play report here so that we can have a document of specific notes needed for the new upgrade. So, in the evening of December 23rd, 2077, there was a scheduled fire drill meant to test out the according protocols for the animatronics. They were allowed to leave through the designated exits to escort children to safety, but were carefully monitored by their managers with a leash on their collars to make sure they didn't try to run off. Everything went as planned at first. Sun led the children out of the daycare, counted all 16 of them, and waited in the parking lot for the drill to end. I am Sun's manager, so I was with him that day. He appeared to be distracted by his own fascination of the outside world, probably because he had never stepped foot outside the Pizzaplex before. He was especially excited about getting to see the real Sun, even though it hurt his eyes when he looked directly at it the first time. While he was covering his eyes to let Moon out so his brother could feel the fresh air too, a child by the name of Crystal Anderson was lured away by a man named Todd Finley, who had his car parked close by. When the drill was over, they began to return to the daycare. Son realized that Crystal was missing when he counted only 15 kids with him. He picked up on the sound of her and Finley interacting just when the man started to try and lure her into his car with the promise of a puppy inside. Son tried to stop him, but was delayed because I, as his manager, shocked him. I thought that he was trying to run off, but this ended up wasting a lot of valuable time. When Son was done explaining what was going on, Finley was able to get Crystal into his vehicle and begin driving away. I let Son pursue him and called the police. The rest has been shown to me by the recording in his eyes. Son followed the car across a busy street until Finley fled into a dirt road that led into the woods beside the nearby neighborhoods. Son caught up to him and jumped on the truck, and upon seeing that, Finley stopped and got out with a gun held to Crystal's head. He threatened to kill her if Son didn't let him go. Son instructed Crystal to cover her ears and proceeded to threaten Finley. The exact words of the threat will be recorded here because of the out-of-character nature of them. You are pointing the gun at the wrong person. You know what sort of accidents this company is famous for. If you hurt her, I will tear you limb from limb and rip every inch of skin off of your body until not even your own mother will be able to recognize you. Let her go. I'll give you to the count of 3. Finley didn't let go of Crystal, but pointed the gun at Son instead, beginning to laugh and taunt him. Son kept on taking steps closer, which slowly frightened Finley more and more until he started firing at Son. Son leaped on top of him and began to attack him while Finley shot him repeatedly. Son eventually forced him to let go of Crystal, and after scanning to make sure she wasn't mortally injured, Son took her back across the road and avoided the newly arrived police, apparently since they weren't her guardian either. He managed to return her to the daycare through the fire exit and reassured the children that he was all right, counting them all again to make sure that they were still there. However, he soon collapsed. Son had been shot 6 times and had suffered major injury to his chest cavity. Luckily, the children were able to get the attention of the adults and let them know that Son was hurt. He was stabilized in parts and services at about the same time that Finley was found and arrested by the authorities. Finley survived, but had been badly injured by Son. A multitude of ribs and facial bones had been broken. Even though the doctors were able to reattach it later, Son had ripped Finley's left arm off, causing permanent nerve damage to the limb even after it was healed. Finley is now awaiting trial for attempted kidnapping. He is probably going to sue, but the recording in Son's eyes clearly showed that the injuries were in self-defense, because Son had been actively getting shot while he hurt Finley. It's worth noting that the threats Son made are the most startling part of this incident. As far as we know, Son's programming should have made it impossible to even conceive a threat like that, much less say it out loud. When asked about it, Son shows great remorse over what he did, but he says that he only did it to get him to let go of Crystal. It is unclear if Moon influenced the threat or if Son came up with it himself, but Son insists that Moon didn't have anything to do with it. He might just be saying that because he doesn't want to get Moon in trouble. End of report. Assessment. Thank you for the report, Wilson. Though we didn't program Son specifically to act that way, his programming told him to keep Crystal safe, so he did what he needed to do to get her away from Finley. Hopefully no more pedos will try their luck in the daycare after this. With reflection, this turned out to be good for the company. The public is finally getting to see that our animatronics were built to take care of children, not to help out while making them disappear. We must add a real security protocol to the bots' programming to help them be more safe or successful in the event that this happens again. Son and Moon almost died that day. Victor Miller. Fazbear Entertainment work email. To all. From Victor Miller. Subject, new policy. The collars will no longer be worn by the animatronics. Effective immediately. Woo! Okay, that was a lot. Hope you guys liked it. My throat finally feels better. I am definitely going to be more careful with it from now on so I don't permanently damage it. I do not need another way for my body to disable me. Okay, sorry that I'm kind of skipping DJ's POV. This section of the rewrite was kind of just going through all the animatronics' heads to get a better feel of what they're like and their problems and stuff, but I ended up getting rid of DJ's chapter because of how bland it was. All of it would have been just the stuff that he describes to Moon, and it was extremely boring to sit through in real time. So I said that I would rather sacrifice symmetry for interesting storytellings instead of, you know, shoehorning in 20 minutes of DJ walking around. Besides that, DJ is the most mentally stable character of the entire cast, so there was not really much extra information about him that we couldn't have already, like, inferred from how he was literally muted for rebelling. He's, like, the only person in the cast that isn't dying of mental illness. And yeah, he wants to help, but for now, having a chapter in his POV seemed pretty pointless. He gets a much bigger role once all this is over and the characters are trying to recover from what happened, but for now, he can't really add much to the story. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed being inside Moon's head. We are kind of closing in on the finale now, so I'm really excited. Thank you for watching. Woo, bye. Oh yeah, wait, I forgot. Okay, I will try to post the next chapter in 2 weeks. I almost ended the recording without actually getting to the important part. Okay, we're doing it in 2 weeks. I'm aiming for 2 weeks. If something goes wrong, it'll get pushed back, except I'm still aiming for 2 weeks. Okay, anyway, real bye this time, bye.